Hey everybody, Daniel Johnson from the Venza Dutch office here. Thank you for attending this webinar. It's an important topic. It's a perennial topic. It's not the first time we've talked about ransomware, but there are some new things that that we believe that you ought to hear. So we'll get into the presentation in a moment, but first I want to thank Eric from Viceroy for being with us. With all of our webinars, we like to make sure that we have our industry experts here. Eric's job is to keep us honest, make sure that what David is presenting and what we're talking about resonates with you, is appropriate and accurate and germane to our industry. So making sure that it is we're speaking directly to the hoteliers and making sure that what we're saying is spot on. So Eric, thanks so much for being here and taking time to be with us.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So our presenter is not the first time presenting at one of our webinars. David is relatively new with Venza. How long have you been with the company now, David? It's a joke.
David is 14 years, right?
David is a co-founder along with myself. So glad to have David. David, do you mind just sharing a little bit about about your certifications and why it is that you are the expert on this one?
Yeah, most definitely. Once again, I'm David Christiansen, one of the co-founders. Got a master's degree in cybersecurity, actually working on my MBA for IT as well at the moment. I've got a lot of the top tier certs like CISM, CISA, CISSP, PCI-QSA. So I've got a lot of the, the advanced certifications for management and also cybersecurity and IT. So just to kind of, and a lot of other smaller intermediate certifications like Cisco's, CompTIA's, CEH, things like that, just to kind of help round out what the skill set, because you can't be a master of too many. You got to be kind of a jack of all trades in cybersecurity, because there's so much to do. Got to have that 1 inch depth of knowledge and for a mile wide, right? So okay, got to get the certifications in just to learn about a little bit of everything, so we can better combat the cyber threats that we see every day.
That's what's out there. I think you're giving. I think you're being a little modest with regards to that 1 inch of depth on it. Great deal of depth. So the format, as I believe everybody who's seen any Venza webinars in the past, the format is we try to keep it as fluid as possible and make sure that this is a conversation. Sean Shields from the Atlanta office is producing this and is monitoring the question and answer, the chat feature. So if you've got questions, we'd love to hear them, and Sean will alert us that those questions are there. Otherwise, the format of this is again, it's very fluid. We don't want to kill with PowerPoint. That's not our intention. Everything that David is going to cover is on one slide. That slide is now visible to everybody. So David's the intention is to have a kind of a one-pager. Take a few moments to walk through it and have a robust conversation with Eric specifically, and with any of you out there that are attending this webinar. So without further ado, we've heard enough from me. David, got two different kind of headings: the be prepared and infection vectors. What have you got for us, pal?
Well, before we jump into those, Daniel, I want to kind of really quick touch high level on the evolution of ransomware. Prior to 2021, maybe 20 and before, ransomware really was a malware that basically take over your computer, your servers, your systems, and encrypt the data where you can't get to it. You had to pay a ransomware to get it back, or you had to go to your backups. Starting in 2021, it's been roughly about 80% of the ransomware attacks just the first half of 2021, and it's gotten worse now. There's more of what they call a double extortion tactic. Not only do they encrypt it, they exfiltrate your data off site, so that if you refuse to pay the ransomware because you've got a good, thorough, formal backup program, they're going to threaten to release that to the public, or they're going to sell it on the dark web. So if they're kind of really saying, you know what, if you don't pay, you're going to pay because we're going to release it. So that's kind of where we're going now. So as that's happening and ransomware gets more evolved, what you see on this one pager is going to change from day to day, month to month, year to year. So what we say today could change tomorrow. I just kind of want to throw that out there. Anything you want to add to that, Eric?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right? So ransomware, I think, has definitely changed. Back in the days, like you said, it's just been, locks up my computer. Worst case scenario, I wipe everything, pull it from backup, reinstall everything. May take me like a day or so, however long it takes. Back online, it's okay. I might lose a little bit of time. But now, like you said, if it's like they're threatening to release your data, now really becomes more of a PR issue for especially hotels or any kind of big name chain, right? You now have to deal with like everyone knowing you just lost like millions of credit card numbers, millions or however many guest information records. So now you have a PR issue on hand. Now you got to spend God knows how much money to repair that reputation. Now you got to go out there and say, oh, yes, but now we have fixed this. Now we have implemented this. Now we have done this to remediate the situation. So it's a much bigger picture once it becomes a PR issue rather than like just an IT technical issue.
Not happening in a vacuum anymore. Huh?
No.
No.
Not with all the LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. People are sharing information everywhere. The moment it goes out there,
Sure.
everybody knows. It goes viral pretty quickly.
Sure enough. Very good. Well, David?
So with that being said, let's jump into being prepared. So based on the kind of the evolution of it, one of these items like defense and depth is probably going to be more of a priority because you've got to stop the ransomware before you even get it, because now it's going to be released potentially. So as you're looking to be prepared, the top 3 topics really are backups, images, instant response plan, and defense in depth. So with the backups and images, that worked very well with the old style of ransomware, to where if you decide not to pay for it, then you can recover devices, machines back to the last point that you're able to do a successful backup. And that's still relevant today in terms of securing your data. If you can get just a normal vanilla flavor of ransomware, that's still a viable option. If you're unwilling to pay for the ransomware and someone threatens to release it, sometimes you got to weigh the risk of, do they really have my data? You don't really know, because a lot of times you'll hear a threat of, we're going to release your data. Do they really have it? So you're going to start reaching out to the FBI for things like that to find out what you should do first in that aspect. But backups and images is your number one strategy to at least recover if you don't pay the ransomware, or if you don't pay it, they go to delete all your information. They won't give you access. You've got to have a way of doing that. And with that, it's got to have the formal backup strategy, regular test them. And worst case scenario, if you do go to recover machines and you go to use new images, what have you, sometimes your hardware is old and you need to have updated hardware that may be incompatible with that software. Anything you want to add on that, Eric, in terms of the backup policies within an organization?
Yeah, backups is also another thing that's gotten a little more complex, I guess I would call it, right? So yes, something happens, you pull from backup, from last night, a few hours ago, a week ago, whatever it is, put it back on. The problem with some of these ransomware is, from what I read, you can correct me if I'm wrong, on average, the ransomware, the actual software sits on most servers for like months at a time before it does anything, on average, right? So by the time you find out, if you pull from backup, well, last night's not going to work because it has the virus on it. You have to pull from months ago. So in hospitality, it gets a little even trickier, because let's say our property management system, I really can't do that, right? So if I were to pull a database from a month ago, I lost a month worth of data. I don't know who checked in last night. I don't know who was checking out today. So to me, that's almost to a point where, well, I actually need it from an hour ago or like 10 minutes ago. So I think for a lot of hoteliers, the key is really to find these ransomware as soon as possible. I guess not just hotels, but anyone, right? But you don't want that to be sitting there for like months at a time, which is why it makes that whole zero-day attacks like so crucial and so difficult to handle. But I think with Venza's help, Cybertech's help, like I think is one of those where we really need to and can find these ransomware quickly and get rid of it like within a day every time.
Yeah, most definitely. Good points. With the backup strategies, if you're going to have you got to go to a more advanced strategy and tools and solutions where it's got to push it off site, and so that if anything gets encrypted on site, those encrypted files aren't putting somewhere else, and have versioning control, things like that. So, like you said, certain systems you can get away with daily backups, but some of those more critical systems that is real-time data, whether even if it's somehow backing up your databases real time to a synced area that if you get breached and encrypted right now, at least you can go back within the last couple of minutes. So definitely it's all about maturity, how much you're willing to spend, how mature of a product and advanced, I would say more of an advanced backup solution you have. Definitely good points. And on your point of,
I just wanted to bring up, David, you both are talking about time, and Eric used the term 0 day. That is a frequently used term. Do you mind either of you defining for folks what that references, 0 day?
Yeah, from what
Eric,
I understood, technically it's somewhat of a not a joke, but like it's once the malware gets released, your software developer gets 0 day to react, hence the name 0 day, right? So by the time you realize it's too late, it's already out there, everything it's infected. So that's hence the name. But I think you guys were, earlier how we talked about the whole antivirus, like kind of, I think the key thing really is to use the more modern stuff, right? The AI antivirus, the intelligence ones, like so that it deals with these 0 days attacks. To me, 0 day, yes, to the software developer is a 0 day. To me, that may not be a 0 day. It could be a week, could be a month, could be half a day. It's not going to hit my system immediately just because it's released out in the public, right? So I actually have time. So for example, like we use Cylance. You can use, I know you guys also do Sentinel-1 at Venza, and you have Darktrace, you have CrowdStrike, you have all kinds of different AI antivirus nowadays that once the public gets a hold of that virus or knows it's starting getting infected, well, I may not be patient 0. So I have that little lead time with the software to kind of figure that out. So I think those are the important stuff to help in addition to that backup that you have.
Yeah. So I mean, exactly. So in the old days, antivirus it was signature based, right? So with the 0 day really means there's no signature. It's so new in the wild that the antivirus companies hadn't had time really to create a signature so that these systems could identify that it was that. So therefore just like you said, it may not have been a day, it could have been a week or two in the wild, but it's 0 day because nothing can detect it by signature. And your point on the EDR, XDR type of systems, which basically your endpoint detection, response tools like ConnectWise, CISA, or the Cylance, things like that as well. The XDR, which you'll hear is a newer one, which Sentinel-1 claims to be an XDR. That's more of an extended detection and recovery tool. They use more of a behavioral analysis and heuristics along with AI and automation, atomic type stuff to detect this, because signatures are not enough. You've got to look at the behavior of the machine. It's going to learn that machine, learn the user's behavior. That's how it finds ransomware and these other new 0 day attacks, is by something that's different. And that's definitely your point is like you said earlier, backups today is not enough. You got to have those, but you've got to stop the malware or ransomware in its tracks. And the Cylance, the ConnectWise, and the Sentinel-1 tools is a part of that defense in depth layers, right? So you got to have the tool, you got to have the backups, you have a lot of things, and just to combat all these different. Malware is going to change. It's ransomware today, it's something else tomorrow. So it's as AI comes out in the marketplace and is used more and more by the hackers and the bad side, these AI tools are going to be more aggressive. We got to combat that ever changing, ever learning machines.
No. Brilliant.
Okay. So So let me, since we're kind of in that defense in depth, let me talk a little bit more on that. So in that, what that means is just use different control types. So you have technical controls, physical, administrative, which is like administrative policies. Physical is locking doors. Technical is really what most, when you think of cybersecurity controls, most people think of technical. That's your softwares, your firewall, stuff like that. And then the type of function. So a control could be technical, but what does it do? Does it prevent? Does it detect? Does it correct? Recover? Compensating? There's a lot of different types and functions of controls. And what we're talking about in defense in depth is don't just put 3 antivirus or malware solutions on a device. That's not really in depth. That's not depths and layers. That's one type of control. You want to have the EDR solution. You want to have the firewall. In the firewall, you want to intrusion prevention system. You want a SIM, which is a log and monitoring system that's detecting other things. You want your policies. You want your training. All those different things together is going to give you your layers and your defense in depth to hopefully stop it before it even happens. Anything you want to add on the anything you've seen on your side and for defense in depth that works for you guys?
Yeah, I think you absolutely sorry, absolutely right. It's, if you can stop it before it happens, great, right? So the question really is how do you stop it, right? So you have, like you said, the technical side of things, so which we have control over to a certain extent, right? You put in, you know, IDS, IPS, you put in the firewall, you put in all these silence, you put in, you know, CrowdStrike, Darktrace, Sentinel-1, whatever else you put on. So I think that's one step. I think the second step really also is the user side, right? Those are the one that what I call less controllable. I don't know what they're going to click on. I don't know what attachment they're going to open. I put in all these anti-phishing, anti-spamware, whatever it is that prevents those emails from coming in, but it's not 100%. Let's be honest, right? We know it's not 100%. You will see some of these spams still kind of come through, and chances are, if you're on your cell phone, it's hard to tell. You just got the email. People are going to click on things. On the computer, still, people are going to click on things. So I think the education, the SAE, security awareness education, is just so important, that to educate your user and say, do not click on this. These are stuff you need to check before you click on it. These, you need to call this person before you even open this email, right? Someone asked for your DOF, your CFO asked you for money. You probably should call, you know, before you just wire that money over. You know, people laugh, right? You'll be surprised how many people actually wire that money before they call, because your day's so busy. We got to pay the bills. You just have to go through your invoices, pay them. But wait, why is my GM asking me for money? He never does. Make that phone call that takes like 2 minutes just to say, hey, did you send this email? Did you mean to ask for me to pay? Or HR, did you really mean for me to send you that list of you know, social security numbers? You know, so that's the part I think is even more important. And obviously, you know, you have your sandboxing on your email link. Those are, you know, makes it easier for the users as well. So.
And the industry has so many. We have tour operators, and we have vendors and excursion teams that do for promotions of guests, etc. And it can be at the property level. It can be somewhat fluid. It's hard at a corporate level. Are you able to you know, the communications that you have at the property level, are you able to, you know, do you have any strategies on how to communicate examples with the properties when you're talking about some of these emails that you're receiving?
Yeah, so, well, it's funny because you guys actually have this great education program that we use, right? So
Yeah.
Venza, you guys are really the ones that that have that program. So within these programs, like, yes, there are examples. Like you give specific examples on, these are the attachments. Do not click on these type of things, right? If your attachment it says like .exe, chances are I probably would not click on it, or .msi, I probably would not click on those kind of things. It's tricky on your cell phone. I think a lot of people look at everyone checks the email on the cell phone, but you don't see the from email address on the cell phone unless you kind of click into it, which you know nobody does, right? Yeah. So you do have to find a way to kind of, from a technology perspective, to at least filter those out, and then ask the user and say, hey, if you try to look up, if it says it's from I don't know, Jeff Venza, right? Well, look at the email address. Is it really from his Jeff Venza at venza.com email, or is it from some, Russia.gmail.ru address? That's a big difference because one's fake, one is not. So examples. I mean, those are the kind of little examples we give users to say, hey, check on these kind of little things. But obviously, you can't cover everything. I mean, they get smarter and smarter by the day. We just have to combat it. Like, you just have to use your common sense. Let's be honest. That's really what it is.
Indeed. Okay.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah. And a little tag here on PCI 4.0s. It's been released. We're going to be. You should be hearing and seeing more training on that coming from Venza down the road. But one little caveat and nugget of 4.0 is that it's now requiring anti-phishing mechanisms to protect users against phishing attacks. And it's also requiring phishing training, social engineering training within this security awareness training aspect. So previously, it was very vague of just have a security awareness training. That was it. Now it's requiring phishing campaigns or phishing training. It's requiring social engineering training. And then that's just on the training level. So that touches the human firewall aspect that you just talked about, Eric. But then on the technical aspect, it is enforcing anti-phishing mechanisms, which would be similar to like an EDR, some of these other tools that we have. So definitely 4.0 for PCI, and then other standards and regulations are also getting more stringent because they realize you've got to stop these attacks because this is the most prevalent attack against all businesses, small to large.
And so many merchants are accepting credit card, have credit card information sent via email and transactions via email.
Exactly.
In Europe, it's something like 30 or 40% of no, it's not that much. I think it's only like 20% of hotel bookings are done with email and credit card information in email. So pretty frightening that it's still up there.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, right? I think like at home, you book your hotels via, let's say, Expedia, Travelocity, cheaptickets.com, those kind of things. Those, from a user's perspective, right, it's a little less to worry about because they're PCI compliant. Well, I hope they are. But those go through a secure tunnel, and everything's end-to-end encrypted. Your credit card goes right to your gateway processor, but those are all encrypted, right, via online. But I think most of those 20% people who are emailing stuff is your group reservations, right? It's what, let's say Venza wants to go do book 50 rooms with Viceroy.
Retreats or something.
You guys really should. But you have to give me a credit card somehow. You can't book 20 rooms, via Expedia. It doesn't work that way, right? So because you get a special rate. And so what you do is you call us, you go through the salespeople, but some hotels now, they really shouldn't, but they take the credit card, via email, via whatever ways that is not compliant. Ideally, what they really do is really subscribe to your service so that I can send, like Viceroy will send Venza a link, and you guys will type in your credit card number via a secure website. We on our end will log in with a user logins and securely retrieve your credit card number that way and use it. And once it's done, everything's locked back in. No one can see it. No one can tell, what your credit card number is. That's how it should be done. But that 20%, often than not, is that type of reservations.
And we want that MICE business. It's a huge part of the industry, that sector, and in business travel and group travel.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. David?
Yeah. Okay. So let's just assume everyone's going to get breached. They're going to someday. So don't wait until you get breached to decide to have an incident response plan. So be prepared. Have your plan in place. Test it all the time. Keep it current. It's going to do is streamline your response to lessen the impact of the incident. It's going to have your PR information. It's going to have everything you need so that you know what to do when it happens. Don't just, like I said, don't wait until it happens to decide what to do. Already know what you're going to do, and that's critical. So this is what do you do if you get a ransomware that has the double extortion tactic, and they say they have your data, you can verify they have your data, they're going to release it. What do you do? So you've got to cover that in your PR stuff. So that's very critical that whether it's at the corporate level, at the property level, that incident response plan is a major factor in the ransomware playground. So anything else, anything you want to add on that, Eric, before we jump into the infection vectors?
No, I mean, I think you said it all. I mean, once you are, like you said, I think it's just a matter of time, right? If, Hillary Clinton's email can be read from Russia, anyone is at risk. Anyone can be hacked. It's just, like you said, it's a matter of time. But all you're trying to do now is reduce the risk, reduce the chance of getting hacked, right? There's only so much you can do. You're right. But once you're hacked, you just have to have some kind of incident response, plan in place. Who do you contact? Like, how do you do your daily work without computers, or for like a day or 2 days or a week? Worst case scenario for I don't know how long. What do? You have to have that kind of plan in place, especially from like in a hotel. Well, I don't know who's checking in. You have to figure out a way to know who's checking in. You got to figure out a way to know how to process people's credit card. Why do you go back to the whole knuckle buster thing? You swipe the credit card on that machine, you take that piece of paper and do it that way, and call the credit card processor on the phone. Got to figure it out. Like, just you have to have that kind of plan. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. So as I'm moving on to the vector, so vector is basically a way in. So how do you get ransomware? So most people think phishing attacks. I'm going to open up an email and I'm going to click on it. I'm going to get that. So, but there are actually the list is greater than just these 4. This is just 4 common ones that the CISA government agency kind of puts out there. So phishing attacks, you got your vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, your malware infections, your third-party MSPs. I think we all know what phishing attack is, how to stop it with training and email filtering, other security tools to reduce the nefarious emails. So I think let's not beat that one up too much more. Let's kind of cover the other 3, which most people people don't really think about the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations of the aspect of it. So really to stop vulnerabilities and configurations, you've got to run your quarterly scans, whether internal, external, and remediate those vulnerabilities. Because if you have systems, you have software, you have operating systems, it's drivers, firmware, any of those things can open you up to infiltration of a hacker into your system, and then they can actually spread ransomware through your organization. And that includes running your patches, your updates, removing insecure and unused protocols. If you're going to use FTP type of software where you got to push files back and forth to a server, make sure it's secure SFTP for port 22, not 21, which is unsecure, right? So just knowing what to do on that, and you can run different tools to find out what those are. Use benchmarks, use guides that are hardening standards for everything you set up, whether it's software or it's hardware. One I like to always say is go to CIS Benchmarks. They're going to give you a guide on just about any flavor of Windows operating system, Macs, different firewalls, access points. There's a lot of different benchmarks on that you can download, use as your gold standard for configuration for that. Anything you want to add on the vulnerability misconfiguration side, Eric?
Yeah, no, I think you covered a good amount of that, and I think the whole patching thing, I'll add a little bit to that, is it's the one that's a little trickier, right? So servers, manageable, you do it once a month, Tuesday, Microsoft Big Tuesdays. I think more people now are working from home. They're taking their computers home. They're bringing home device, or bring their own devices, whatnot, cell phones. It's not just about computer patching anymore. It's also about cell phone patching. Are you patching your cell phone? You just got your email on it. It's if you one of those few that's emailing credit card, don't do it. But it's on there. So if your cell phone gets hacked, then now you're losing stuff. You have company proprietary data on your cell phone, likely, in addition to email. Well, got to be careful with that too. And then once people take the computer off your work network to a home network, you got to make sure that that computer is still being patched when they're working from home for the past 2 years. So now it adds a whole new complexity to, well, how do I manage these remote computers? How do we patch them? How do we make sure those are hardened? So your home network is, guarantee you, most people's home network, they don't have a firewall. They're not hardened. So how do you protect that without all that security in your office now when you bring your computers home? So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, adding just yet another wrinkle of the complexity with the remote workforce. Indeed.
Definitely. And as we're wrapping up this the 30 minutes here, malware infections and third-party MSP. So malware infections, I think we've talked about a lot of the tools for that: SentinelOne, Cylance, CrowdStrike, those advanced, more next generation, whatever other keywords you want to throw out there to the day. Use that AI, that type of technology. Use those tools to help detect malware, because once malware's in, that that malware, ransomware is a type of malware. But just you want to stop the spread of any of those, anything that's going to help spread the ransomware. And but these tools are going to, for the most part, stop it in its tracking. And when you have some of these other tools, I'm not sure about Cylance, but I know the other two have like a ransomware warranty where they'll cover up to $1 million in a year and $1,000 per endpoint if it gets breached and it's been set up and configured correctly through the user tool. So not only will they more than likely stop the breach, is actually, if it does happen, they will even help pay for it, right? So some of these tools, you've got to stop that malware infection. And it's a lot of that is application whitelisting and software policies. Make sure that there's not software on the machines that shouldn't be there. Take away the user's admin rights. Only certain people can install software. That's how you help control that and what goes on those, and helps stop the spread of the malware.
And a lot of times it's just doing proper inventory of your data processing activities. Find out what software, what systems processing any kind of valuable data.
Yep, exactly. And kind of on that same caveat, third party and MSP, that vendor management, that data processing, you also got to, manage your vendors. You got to know who you're using. You got to vet the vendors. You've got to do risk management on those. So send out your yearly security surveys and then spot check those. Look at them online to see if they've ever had a breach. How many breaches have they had? So you really got to do your due diligence on the vendors, or you can be like another target. So we got to be very mindful of your third party, because their systems that they're using in your environment could actually be the open door, that window to spread your malware, ransomware, or anything else, or a nefarious attacker inside. Anything you would like to add to any one of those two bullets, Eric, before we wrap up?
Yeah, so it's funny, it's not funny, but I think on average they say, well, you have 6 days of downtime once you're infected with malware or ransomware type of deal, right? That's it's a good amount of time. And often these are from the third party, like you said, right? So you got to be careful with those. So one thing you can do is not so much of a technical thing. It's you do want to kind of push that liability a little bit back to the third party. Like when you sign a contract with them, we often do kind of put a line in there and say, hey, you know what, you guys are liable. If you, as the third party vendor of ours, lose our data, you are now liable for all damages. That's something you can do to kind of enforce the vendor to be a little bit more diligent and be more responsible, Are
you issuing, it's certainly popular here in Europe, the data processing agreements. Do you work with a lot of we call them DPAs here? Do you issue DPAs with your vendors, standard data processing agreement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do have separate DPAs on different vendors. Look, it will be a little bit different on different vendors. Like your smaller vendors may not be able to do certain requirements. Bigger ones may be able to cover more. So with the whole CCPA, with the whole GDPR nowadays, you do have to be a little bit more careful, kind of like who's really the key is just who's responsible for your data. Like, are you responsible? Ultimately, you are, honestly, from a guest perspective. They give me their data. They don't care how I lose it. We're responsible. But at the same time, who's going to pay for the damages? That's the other part, right? You do want to kind of figure out what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, and limit your liability wherever you can.
Yeah,
exactly.
and with PCI side of things, 12.8 is all about service provider, which now is TSP, so it's changing a little bit. So it's inside your agreements, you should dictate which requirement is that vendor responsible for, how are they protecting it, and then what are they doing about it. So same thing, you're putting the liability back on them as well. That there's you've got requirement this, and that. And you verify that they are doing it in a compliance manner with their attestation of compliance. But at the same time, now with 4.0, there's a new requirement that states that the service providers must actually give you the documentation. In the previous time, the merchants that they're used to running the Hiltons or Marriott's or whoever and say, hey, I need your documents, give me your documents, give me your documents, and they would get a lot of pushback. Now with the new flavor of 4.0 for PCI, there's actually a requirement for the service providers to say they must now give the documentation and be responsible for providing it. So they're kind of helping the merchants now a little more, and instead of giving a little, chasing the chickens, right, trying to get all these different various documents. Now it's up to the service providers to now provide it. So that's going to help a lot in the next year or two.
Very great. I don't want to break up your mojo, David, but we are over that 30-minute mark by a shade. So is there anything else that you want to share just before we wrap up? I do see that there were a couple things added there with in the chat, and not so much questions, but some good bits of advice referencing if you're not expecting an email and if there's a sense of urgency to it, and those kinds of things. Those are some signs that it might not be an email that you want to respond to or immediately send money to, and that kind of thing. So some best practices there.
Yeah, and I in the chat box too, I put 2 links for the CISA references. So a lot of this information you can find on CISA and really details. But if I've been hit by ransomware, now what? So there's a good link there about that, and there's actually some pretty good response steps, 1 through whatever it is on that. So definitely use your references or resources that are out there. And this is CISA is a very good resource, not just for government and large businesses, but for small businesses as well. So they've done their due diligence. They are the experts, and so use those guides, and put some information into your response plans.
Fantastic. Well, as always, Eric, thank you so much for taking your time and being here and keeping David honest. And for all of you that are out there, thank you so much for spending some time here with the Venza team, cyber tech team. And yeah, hopefully this was informative and insightful. So we'll see.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, you bet. See you next time at the next webinar from Venza.